This is West of Everest. I am Lee Benson. He is Grant Benson, and we are back, at least for now. We're back to talk about the world of OU football, and yes, I am aware that this is our first episode in nearly 2 months. So if you're new to the show or just have forgot, which is understandable, you can watch this show on YouTube and also on Spotify. Plus, you can get this show wherever finer podcasts can be downloaded. You can also listen to it on Spotify if you don't want to watch it. All right, so when we take these long breaks between shows, I like to do a couple of things when we come back. So one, I want to thank all the longtime listeners who've stuck with us for almost 10 years now, which every time we bring up how long this has been going on, it always surprises me. And number two, I like to remind everybody that this is a free podcast. We have no sponsors, and that gives us the freedom to take breaks whenever we want. And the off season is a great break time because the older I get, to be honest with you, the more difficult it is to talk about football in March, April, and May, and also, I guess, June to some extent. So coming up on the show, we'll catch you up on all of our spring practice thoughts, get you prepped for next Saturday's spring game, and, of course, we'll talk about the most interesting thing of the offseason, in my opinion, and that is the Owen Heinecke situation. Heineke's got a court date this upcoming Thursday, April 16th, and it's expected during that day, or on that day, that we will find out if Heinecke will be eligible to play for the Sooners this fall or not. So with that, I will officially say hello and welcome back, Grant, to the podcast. What's going on?
Hello. Not much going on. It's been a nice little break here. Kind of in the same boat you are. I think it's a convergence of a lot of different things. You get a little bit older. We've done this. This is going to be the 10th football season that we've done for this show. And so when this time of the year comes around, it all feels very familiar, sort of like Groundhog Day. It's like, well, we're having all of these conversations again. And you get it. I mean, life is a monotonous thing. I mean, sometimes you just need content and you need things to distract you from your life. And I kind of think that's sort of what spring football is all about from the fan side of everything. But, it does get a little old after a while. How many times in how many creative ways can you say, yeah, this looks good, I don't know about that, but it all comes down to whether or not John Mateer is very good next year anyway. And that's essentially what it is, that's the reality that I think everybody sort of understands. But it's kind of boring. It's kind of a boring thing because we're not really going to know until that very first weekend of September.
Yeah, and more power to all of my friends that are still in the media and cover OU and do this and enjoy it and like it, because there's times where I had to, everyone knows that has listened to this show for a long time. This used to be my job. And, it was having this podcast while also covering the team. It made it a lot easier because I was out at all the availabilities and could listen to everything and I was plugged in. And, but as time goes on, man, I realized that I was not enjoying that as much as I used to, because it's just kind of what we're talking about. It was the same thing over and over and over again. And Venables coming on and all the change between him and Riley, that was new. So it was like, okay, this is kind of cool. This is different. But at this point, it's just kind of the same now. And Oklahoma, OU came off a really good season, and that's the hope. But there's just not a whole lot that you can take from spring ball. There just isn't. So that's where we are. And that's us, I guess, complaining about getting older. So here's the idea that I came up with to catch us up and catch the listeners up on everything that's happened since our last show, which was on February 16th, so almost a month ago. Hopefully this is not going to take too much time. We'll see. And I'm going to give a plug here because this show is going to be, in a way, presented by the team at Sooners on SI. And that's the website hosted by John Hoover, Ryan Chapman, Carson Field, Ryan Aber, and some guy called Brady Trantham. Never heard of him. And I went all the way back to February 16th and went through all the football headlines, because if any news happens in the world of Oklahoma football, the Sooners on SI website and that team, those guys are on it. And it's not just football. They're on softball and basketball and everything like that. So good people over there. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to read some headlines and we're going to react to the news. And my thought is I really don't want to spend a bunch of time reacting to each headline because we have a decent amount here, but whatever comes to us. And we're going to go all the way back to the last episode of our show, the date of February 16th. And the first headline, former OU tight ends coach Joe John Finley lands group of 5 job. And that group of 5 job is Texas State. So Joe John Finley to Texas State as an offensive assistant. Somehow, 2 months later, I couldn't find any stories with any additional details on that. So I don't know exactly what his role is. I went to the Texas State website and I couldn't find anything, or else also maybe I didn't do that. I don't know. But I'll be honest with you, Grant, I didn't even know this happened. This totally flew under the radar. That's how kind of unplugged I've been. This happened the same day as our last show. Had no idea that Joe John Finley had gotten a new job.
The whole thing was just weird. The school never even announced that he was no longer part of the team. They just announced that Jason Witten was hired. And so that kind of, if you really want to peek under the covers there, I think you could start to think about, is Brent Venables, does he really have like the gumption to do what is right? Because it kind of sounds like they tried to pick the path of least resistance here. It's, they probably, well, on one end, outside of Bill Bedenbaugh, they probably should have fired the entire offensive staff after 2024. That's an opinion that I've communicated on this podcast. And then when the tight end room was in such poor shape a season ago, I mean, a converted linebacker was by far their best tight end. Honestly, was probably their second best pass catcher just on the team last season. It didn't look very good, and you can't even fire the guy. It's just sort of like kind of a, hey, we hired someone else, I hope you find something else type deal. And it kind of feels like that's been the MO of Brent Venables up to this point. And he did fire Seth Luttrell midseason, but it kind of seemed like it wounded him to his core to do so. And I get it. He's very obviously an emotional guy. He's all about relationships. So it hurts him to hurt other people. But I do think it's necessary to have sort of like a professional mindset to it. It's like, hey, I do care about these people, but this is a business. And Joe John Finley has made millions of dollars coaching college football. Something tells me in terms of financial resources, he's not lacking. He's doing just fine. So, and he's already landed on his feet. Yes, I think it's an interesting sort of funny thing that this guy who was effectively the offensive coordinator for 1/2 season at Oklahoma, an SEC program, a top 5 program of all time, he is now a nondescript offensive assistant at Texas State, the powerhouse Texas State. I think it's you can maybe read too much into it, but symbolically it says a lot.
Hey, and just here on April 12th, as we record in the morning, I'm on Texas State's official website and their coaching staff. He ain't listed on the coaching staff's website. And there's even an analyst.
The analysts are listed too?
There's a special teams analyst listed on here. There's no offensive analyst, but I'm going to guess that's probably what he is. But the fact that he's not even on the website and we're in the middle of spring ball, there's got to be something else going on, maybe behind the scenes, like where official contract maybe couldn't. Who's to say? What if Joe John Finley is still like weirdly employed with OU and there's like, I don't know. That I'm just
paying a buyout. Well, I mean, they definitely had to pay a buyout of some sort. I mean, if he got fired,
but why wouldn't he be on their website if he's on staff? And I can't. Anyway, who cares?
Could be they're just not super buttoned up there over at Texas State, the Bobcats. I think I'm not positive, but let's put a bookmark in this because he did coach the tight end room, and I know that I just said that every single headline during spring is all just sort of just whatever because it comes down to John Mateer anyway. I think some people would maybe bristle against that, push up against that, and say, there's things that can be done in the run game that have nothing to do with John Mateer, and I want to put a little bookmark in the tight ends there because that has definitely been a storyline during spring so far. We have other headlines coming up that I'm going to neatly fit it in.
I do want to acknowledge one point you made, just because I think it's interesting. The part about Venables and Joe John Finley and maybe not really wanting to fire him. And you mentioned Joe John's made a lot of money and as an assistant coach, and he's already got a job. I agree. I think it's interesting whenever Brent Venables. I've gone back to this before on the show, where because I have changed careers. I've got out of sports. I've done different things, and so Brent Venables is somebody who has been around football his entire life, especially his entire professional life. He knows everything about football, presumably, and so, in my opinion, I've never been in his spot, so maybe there's something that I'm missing, and there probably is. But I totally agree with you. If the lack of production at any position on the field, in the coaching staff, and he knows everything about football. it's so easy after all this time to go to Joe John Finley or any of his assistant coaches and provide all this evidence of why they're not living up to standard. And also knowing that in this world of college football and football, that when coaches get let go, like they have a very high likelihood of finding some sort of a job, whether it's in college, even in high school, and they can. And given that Joe John Finley has made a decent amount of money, like he's probably fine either way. So I think it's weird to me. And again, possibly missing something. It should not be that difficult to have those conversations, even if you are really close with somebody, because that person's got to know too. Like, dude, and also you're gonna be fine. You have a very high likelihood of being just fine. So,
well, I think it's okay to acknowledge that the conversations are hard. I mean, they're still
sure. The
conversation. Joe John Finley
easy.
is an alum. I mean, he was on different sides of the ball, but Joe John Finley played for Brent Venables. I mean, and so that's it's a difficult emotional conversation, no doubt. It's a difficult situation emotionally.
Yeah.
But you still got to do it. That's what the head guy at the University of Oklahoma has to do. And to your point, Joe John Finley knows that his tight end room wasn't good. I'm sure he's not a dummy. Like he went his very first year
Venables
at OU
is missing something, and like he's actually wrong about. Oh, he actually should keep Joe John Finley. No, like there's no. Sorry to jump in, but that's another thing too. Like you should be very confident that you can make this move, despite that discussion would be difficult, but it's got to be done.
And also, I think it's we're kind of piling on Joe John Finley here a little bit, but I do want to point out that when he was the offensive coordinator in the second half of 2024, I thought was obviously better than Seth Luttrell. Still not good, but obviously better than Seth Luttrell. So he's not. I mean, so who's to say? Joe John Finley very well may be a good college football coach. Maybe he was just in a bad position here. He got Braden Willis the very first year he was here in his room, and then everything just kind of fell off of a cliff. That's on him.
All right. Well, man, that first headline took way longer than I thought. So that's not a good sign for the length of our show. Next one.
This is what do you? I mean, what do you expect? This is what I said right before we recorded. Let's make this a tight one. And as every time I say that, we set records. So here we go.
All right. Next one. February 18th, 2 days later, Oklahoma expected to hire former NFL assistant as new running backs coach. And that coach is Dylan McCullough, formerly of the Raiders and formerly of Notre Dame, and I believe the father of Deshaun McCullough, who used to be at Oklahoma. And so, of course, that hire went through. And so that's a huge story of the offseason that we have not commented on.
Dea McCullough erasure right there. We also spent 1 year.
Yeah, I couldn't remember the other brother's name, so that's why I left him out. But so yeah, Dylan McCullough, the new running backs coach, seemingly he had a year with the Raiders, but before he coached at Notre Dame. Jeremiah Love was there when he was, and going back through his history, I want to say he's got a lot more skins on the wall than the previous running backs coach at Oklahoma.
Can I bring up his stint? So he started his first year as a running back coach at the college level was 2011 with Indiana. His first 2 years his first 2 years there, 2011, 2012, a name at the top I didn't really recognize, but he did have back-to-back 1,000-yard rushers his first 2 years there, a guy I've never heard of. But then his third and fourth years at Indiana, he had Tevin Coleman. Did you know Tevin Coleman ran for over 2,000 yards his last year at Indiana? Just had a monster season.
Wow.
Had a little over 2,000 yards, over 7 yards per carry.
At Indiana. Was Kevin Wilson still coaching at that time?
I think he may have been. Yeah. So Tevin Coleman. Right after Tevin Coleman, he had Jordan Howard at Indiana, who is a 3-time 1,000-yard rusher at the NFL level. So that is certainly a skin on the wall. He spent 1 season at USC, and in that season he coached Ronald Jones, who is a guy who didn't really have much of an NFL career, but was a guy that was around for a handful of years, had a really good last season at USC. He spent 3 seasons with the Kansas City Chiefs, Kareem Hunt, Damian Williams, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. The running game when he was there was never great, but they also won a Super Bowl, lost in another Super Bowl, and lost to Tom Brady in an AFC Championship game. And then, of course, he comes back to the college level. His last stint in college at Notre Dame has Audric Estime and Jeremiah Love on his ledger in the 3 seasons that he spent at Notre Dame. I think Estime was already there. He just coached him up. Estime had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons in 22 and 23. He did recruit and retain Jeremiah Love and also coached him in the first Jeremiah Love blow-up season in 2024. So that's a lot. Hey, we spent on our last podcast, I thought we spent quite a bit of time talking about Deshaun Foster, a guy who, or if you read the tea leaves from all the information that had leaked out, it kind of seemed like he was going to be the guy. And we thought, looking at his resume, that'd probably be pretty decent hire. You know, he also had some skins on the wall at a place that doesn't have a history of success. Dylan McCullough is as far as running back coach hires go, that's about as close to a home run hire as you possibly can. The guy is just, he's produced. These are guys, I mean,
Yep.
you just go up and down the list of these names here. He's
No, it's
produced and
excellent.
he's got it's excellent. And he's got, if you go up and down, even his years at Indiana, he's always had production pretty much everywhere he's been at the running back level. So we'll see what he can do with these guys. It's been interesting for sure. The running back room it kind of sounds like in spring has been a total disaster again in spring in terms of health and people actually being out there. So I hope that's like one last gasp of dysfunction before McCullough can sort of leave his mark on the thing. Is a great hire. It surprised a lot of people. It kind of came out of nowhere.
Well, and again, I'll admit I haven't done as much background on this. You've done a lot more, so thank you for that. Just looking at, we talked about Kevin Wilson. So yes, that time with Tevin Coleman at Indiana, Kevin Wilson was the head coach. And in fact, and this has probably already been brought up by others that have been more dialed in than me, but Kevin Wilson and McCullough were at Indiana the same amount of time. So that tells me Kevin Wilson probably brought McCullough on, and that's probably the connection that brought McCullough. Well, granted, McCullough had, his kids were at OU for a bit too, but I'm sure that helped quite a bit that Kevin Wilson's on staff at OU and they had that background from 2011 to 2016. And at Indiana, where, prior to SIG, Kevin Wilson, obviously a good offensive mind, and Indiana's offense was always pretty solid. Like overall, they weren't that great, but their offense was always pretty good. So yeah, the signs are pointing up on paper, but yeah, we'll talk about more about the running back room obviously as the show goes on. But yeah, it's another spring, McCullough is probably inheriting just an absolute disaster of a room.
It just is. Yeah, it was the end of last season, the worst the running back room has ever been since I've been following Oklahoma football. Just in terms of how it was managed, health, all of the above. And so I hope this is a nice little fresh start for that room. It's certainly a great hire. And so very, very excited to put the DeMarco Murray era totally behind us.
All right, next headline from the Sooners on SI team from February 26th. And this is we don't have to spend much time on this. This is a shout out to a previous or former player. OU defensive tackle Grayson Halton put on a show at the NFL Scouting Combine. 36.5-inch vertical, which led all defensive tackles. Also excelled in the broad jump, the 40, and the 20-yard shuttle. Ran a 4.81 40 at that size. So just wanted to acknowledge Grayson Halton. I know you've always been a big Grayson Halton guy. I'm very curious to see where he gets drafted because he is an incredible athlete for his size and hopefully will be one of those players that has a long, productive NFL career.
Yeah, he's going to be. I think he's a long-term NFL vet, maybe a Pro Bowler at times. He's just a really solid player. And he's in the mold of some past defensive linemen that Venables has put in the league, and like Grady Jarrett. I know he's gotten a lot of comparisons to Grady Jarrett, and I see it. I mean, he's sort of bowling ball-ish body type, but he moves so well. And it doesn't surprise me that he put on a show at the Combine. He's always been a guy who is just, especially when he's pass rushing, he closes quickly. And he's fun to watch. I think he's pretty easily one of the more underrated players of the last, 10, 15 years of OU football. And I mean, of course, he's going to be a second or third round pick at defensive line. He's a great player. He's one of the best defensive players they've had in a really, in some time span. So love Halton. He's gonna be tough to replace. I think their top two line guys, Stone and Jackson, are about as good as anyone in the country probably. But man, Grayson Halton was so good last year. I'm not sure if Bishop Thomas is going to be able to replicate that. So maybe they can make up for it in the aggregate. Who knows? But I think Halton is pretty easily the biggest loss from last year's team.
Well, and I have memories of it was probably prior to the 24 season, so a couple of seasons ago, whether it was spring or fall. Grayson Alton, it's nice whenever we can say, we're doing these preview like either spring or fall, and like, hey man, like this needs to happen because they're kind of the depth is not great. Like, man, Grayson Dalton's got to take a jump. He's got to be able to be one of those guys that's a true, plug in player depth on the defensive line on the inside, and he met it and exceeded those expectations. So, Todd Bates, terrific assistant coach. Todd Bates, maybe he can pull another Grayson Halton type player out of his butt. That's the hope because he's done it before.
And I know we're going to talk about some guys being banged up over spring. It kind of reminds me too that Grayson Halton was banged up all of the end of last summer. He didn't practice a whole lot in fall, and as soon it's like he was healthy enough to play, and then he was just great immediately. So hopefully that will also be the case for the aforementioned David Stone and Jane Jackson, who have not practiced really at all this spring.
All right, next up, we're into March. No need to spend too much time on this headline, but just found it to be notable. OU lands 2027 linebacker Cooper Witten, which of course is the son of new tight ends coach Jason Witten. And in the 247 composite, Witten is a 5-star player, playing both ways for Texas Private High School League. I watched a little bit of his high school tape, and he looks like an easy athlete. It's one of those things where I saw him and thought, like, I actually would probably prefer him to play offense, but he's like a bit undersized, 6'1", 6'2", which is he's not small, but if he's going to be like a tight end or something, that's like Jaron Kanik level size, which I think is doable for certain situations, but long term, probably not the best.
You have to move really, really well if you're going to be that size of tight end.
And he was spread out, like on the offensive side. I saw a couple, like he'd be spread totally out wide, as like a receiver. So anyways, Cooper Witten, kind of not that surprising. That was kind of the rumor once OU hired Jason Witten. So not a recruiting podcast, but a notable commitment.
Yeah, Lee, are you aware that currently Oklahoma has the #1 recruiting class for the 2027 season? Probably not going to stay that way. They're kind of out there. They got a lot more commits than most teams. They already have 20 commits at this point. But you look at some of their more high level guys. They got a lot of top 100 guys, a lot of blue chippers in there. So again, not a recruiting podcast. You have no idea. It's likely that half of those guys won't be around for their second season the way that college football is going. So, but it's nice to get them in. It's like, hey, some guys from the 2025 class. There's a lot of guys still left over from there who took a red shirt or didn't, or just played on special teams and came back for a second year as well. So it does kind of everyone was, OU last season had their worst recruiting class on paper. Basically in the recruiting service era. And they have a 10-2 playoff season, and they've shot up to #1. So like a top 5 class is very, very doable this time around. They don't even have their quarterback in this class yet, which that'll bump it up a little bit too. So that's one. Or I'm not necessarily looking at very deeply into who is in this class anymore, but recruiting still matters, and getting as many blue chip guys as you possibly can sprinkled in with maybe some projects that you think can develop is still really, really important in this day and age. It looks like if Oklahoma wins on the field, recruiting at the high school level is not going to be a problem, which I think Venables has proved that since he's been here.
All right, we're going to fast forward all the way to March 23rd, and so now we're going to get into some meat of this podcast, and credit Ryan Chapman, good friend Ryan, for a couple of the next 2 headlines. They're going to be good podcast topics, good offseason fodder. So the first one, 3 burning questions for OU's offense entering spring practice. So the first one is, honestly, man, it's just not that interesting because this is the whole thing is, number one, can John Mateer take a step forward? That's the obvious question. It's if he's the same guy as last year, Oklahoma's going to have a very hard cap ceiling. If he can improve upon last year, not get injured, then yeah, Oklahoma can maybe do some things. I don't know what else to say. We're going to have so much time to talk about John Mateer, but
were you following? This would have been about a month or so ago when OU was holding their pro day and everything like that. Did you miss the entire news cycle, or did you see that about his throwing motion like during the end? I gotta tell you, man, I just put me to sleep. I don't care about his. I do
Guys,
have like,
guys, that quarterbacks
yeah,
don't change their throwing motion when they've done this much quarterbacking. Doesn't happen.
yeah,
Sorry, not
it's
happening.
like my assumption is that the sidearm is still very much there, and like he's got to improve his mechanics. But to me, it's his lower body that he's got to get
Exactly.
better with. It's like I just he's gotten this far with, and he's got a strong arm doing his little sidearm slingshot. Don't mess with that. Let him be who he is there, but he can improve his lower body. That is like
Yes, that is
that's
doable.
a big thing. And so he can do his little sidearm stuff as long as he's got like a good base and all of that, and his hips and everything are pointed in the right direction. So the John Mateer is changing his throwing motion stuff. I just man, I just don't care. Let me, you know, it's
Well, what is it
my
with John
mind.
Mateer?
Yeah, it's like
As
to me that seems like it'll do more harm than good, but
sure.
that's
No,
a
I was just
vibe.
saying for Mateer, yeah, the throwing motions, I highly doubt we'll see anything different. But yes, you're right. His base, his mechanics from his waist down, his hips down can be altered. The the biggest issue with Mateer though is I think we saw after last season he didn't know what he's looking at. He ain't
He
seeing it,
doesn't see it.
and that's a Ben Arbuckle thing. And Kazeski or whatever the heck you say the quarterback's coach name.
There's been a lot of Kuzieski stuff, and I know they made him available to the media in the last couple of weeks or so. And I got to tell you, I kind of wish they would have moved on from Kuzieski. I wish they would have found someone else. And I know he's been with Arbuckle for a long time, but he just maybe
Not
he
doing it
he
for you?
needed another. No, not doing it for me. I don't. You need John Mateer to improve a lot, and you bring back all of the exact same people who were in that room last year. It's just it's a little iffy to me. How do we know that Kuzieski knows how to improve Mateer? But it's I'm with you. A lot of it is Mateer could not, he could just stay fully healthy next season. No hands, nothing, no weird knee thing that I still think really slowed him down in the run game too. He can do all of that, and if he just improves with pre-snap stuff and knowing that, like, he can be way better. And so that's where I'm like, I don't think John Mateer is like a high-level NFL quick processor, but you don't need that in college. That is on Ben Arbuckle. That's totally on Ben Arbuckle. You got to make this easier for him because there have been a ton of dudes in college who can't see it, who have great seasons because their offensive coordinator holds
Oh
their
yeah.
hand. There's dudes who have won national championships doing that. So like it's, I think that's where he needs to take his big step. And it kind of they're paying lip service to it. Like Venables talking to the media saying that Mateer he's been watching a lot of film, been in the film room, and so I will say, and it's I mean it obviously was a step up in competition, a speed of the game thing. But you go back and watch his Washington State stuff, it kind of seems like he's seen it a lot better there. And I was one of those guys who was like, well, yeah, Mateer looks like a guy who's just kind of a better athlete than everybody. But yeah, that step up to the SEC is going to be tough. But I was like, yeah, but everyone around him is going to be a lot better too. And no, I mean, it looked like at times that he was struggling with the speed of the game and couldn't. And how much did his hand affect that? Probably a lot. I mean, he clearly wasn't healthy in that regard. But I don't know. Maybe if everything stays good around him next season, things will get better. But there are ways that the team can help him out too, and that'll be the number 2 headline we're going through. The second burning
Yeah.
question, where I will bring it back around with the tight ends.
Well, and also something that you had mentioned that I think I pushed back on, but it's probably a lot closer than I thought. I mean, there's also the chance that the Washington State receivers that he had were, in a way, I mean, their best receiver was better than anybody Oklahoma had. Well,
First round pick.
Satania's. We'll see what Satania
Satania's
does.
good. Satania's good.
Yeah, he's really good. But Kyle Williams was really good, and I thought the
Hudson.
other receivers for Washington State were pretty solid too. But also, how much of that was just the competition? Oh yeah, that's right. That was my argument. It's like throw Oklahoma's receivers against that schedule, they're going to look a lot better too. And that it just, anyways, who cares? We've already talked about that. Yeah.
And
Next
also,
question.
until
Okay.
until Mateer broke his hand, they weren't a great throwing team, but they could throw it. They're tossing it around. It was like, and
That's
that
true.
it was before Mateer's hand and Keontae Lewis, running into the wall. That's when the passing game fell off of a cliff.
Yeah. I agree. Next question in the 3 burning questions. Will Oklahoma's rushing attack get back online? Now that's I mean, you and we've been banging the drum against DeMarco Murray. I do think coaching is the most important thing for the most part. Obviously, you have to have talent, but at the college level, I mean, yeah, it's coaching is so important, and it shouldn't be that big of a deal at running backs coach, but apparently it is. And well, then again, we'll see if Oklahoma's running back room is also a disaster again this year. Then maybe we'll have to do some apologizing to DeMarco Murray. But I'm pretty confident that's not going to be the case. I think you have to try to mess it up in the running back room because again, I think that is the easiest position to see if a player is good or not. Just we can all kind of see it, and it didn't compute for 3 seasons, the last 3 years, and so will it get back online? I don't know. I mean, injuries have been an issue. Are injuries going to be better? Maybe fewer injuries. Right now in spring ball, the 2 top guys from last year are not participating.
Weird, because they basically were not participating at the end of the season either, despite being out on the field. Yeah, it's not great. It's they really need to stay healthy there. So it sounds like Xavier Robinson was fully healthy going into spring. He got nicked up. They're saying that it's like a calf injury. I don't know. You and I have seen video of his injury. It's out there. There was like, I think, but when I first saw it, I was like, oh, that looked really bad. It was non-contact, kind of like an Achilles injury, but it doesn't seem like if it was something like that, we haven't heard any sort of confirmation, just that he has a calf thing and he's in a boot. So he's hurt. Torrey Blaylock, I don't know what's going on with him. I don't think he's been seen all of spring practice. So he's hurt. So Desefin Walker and Jonathan Hatton have gotten a lot of run, it sounds like, and so is Lloyd Avant too. I think Avant's going to be their leading rusher next year anyway, just because he's a warm body who is healthy and has experience at the college level. And I just, Xavier Robinson is just not going to be healthy next year. I think you can't just keep running your head into the wall every single time and expect a different result. The guy's hurt. He cannot stay healthy. So, and then Torrey Blaylock, I remember them saying that he wasn't healthy at the beginning of last season when he was getting a lot of run with his shoulder or whatever. It doesn't sound like he's still healthy. I don't know. He's still not a particularly impressive player. So, we'll see. I don't know. I hope the freshmen are good. And also, but this is where it gets interesting, where it's because the big, what I keep hearing from everybody who goes out and watches practice is just how much different that tight end room looks. And I buy it. I mean, they actually got some real guys in there now. Hayden Hansen seems to be tight end 1 at this point in time, and he is more of a blocker. And I'm one of those guys, and I want to talk about the tight ends in the run game here. And maybe sounds like they're tweaking their scheme a little bit to be more of like an outside zone-ish sort of team, which would help with better blocking, athletic tight ends. I can tell you, man, I'm more of the opinion of, if your running game relies on your tight ends blocking well, your run game design sucks. Is essentially what it is. Of course, a good blocking tight end can help immensely in that regard. But if it's not working, why do you keep doing it? And I saw that time and time again last season, just a complete unwillingness to adjust to what your personnel is. And so we'll see. But I still think the biggest thing driving whether or not the run game gets better next year is all of these guys with experience coming back on the offensive line. They just got to take a step and they got to be better. I think that's the biggest thing. Tight end can help, but how much so? I don't know. And I'm willing to eat crow on that. Let's say they come out next year and they're just pounding the rock and just shoving it down people's throats. And you see Hayden Hansen and Trine Washington and Jack Van Dorsel just putting guys in the dirt. And it's like, then I'll be hand up. I was like, there you go. Tight ends are that important. But I'm more of like that thing where a good blocking tight end can take your running game from being good to great type thing. Not it can take it from being bad to functional. I'm not sure if that's a thing.
Yeah, it depends on the scheme. I mean, I think tight ends in the running game is, in my opinion, like more of like a complementary function. And I mean, I look at in the NFL. I mean, I like the Bears. Ben Johnson's offense. They use a lot of heavy sets here and there with tight ends, but a lot of Ben Johnson's offense is under center and outside zone and pounding the rock. And I mean, they do shotgun too, but Ben Arbuckle's offense is no under center. I mean, it's all shotgun spread. And I don't know how much tight ends can really impact that as much as maybe those that are really banging the drum for the tight end want you to think they do. So yeah, I'm with you. It's great that they're bigger, and sure, yeah, maybe that'll be a bigger factor than you and I are anticipating. But yeah, I think it's going to come down to just one, the running backs coach um, managing the room a lot better and getting the right players in there that can actually see holes and run the ball. Because there's been a huge issue with Oklahoma playing running backs that seemingly just do not know how to have much of a feel for where to go. Xavier Robinson's been the best the last couple of years, but he's also not very explosive, and he gets hurt a lot. So
I
that's
mean, he
been
may
the
be
issue.
explosive, but we have no idea because he's always banged up.
Yeah.
You know, so it's
Okay.
this is something that could make John Mateer have a better season if they're running the ball a lot better. That'll make teams have to respect different. But I mean, everybody knows it. If you run the ball well, play action works a lot better. You can huck it deep a lot easier. So yeah, I mean, this is it's really important to get it. But I do think what happens with Michael Fasusi and Eddie Pierre-Louis, and what happens at guard with Ozida and Ryan Foje, who has been out a little bit. Amarian Harris, it kind of sounds like, is going to be the right tackle. Those guys finding cohesion and taking the next step is a much bigger deal to the run game than what's going on. And hey, it sounds like they're going to outside zone, and that may be a better fit for what they have because they have two really athletic tackles, and they're a little, their center in the middle is not much of a road grader. In fact, he's pretty pitiful at blocking up the run game. So maybe getting outside, being more athletic, getting your guys to move more is where they need to be a lot. But that takes time, that takes reps, and it's not great that some guys are out. Your top two, presumably your top two running backs are out. So they're already sort of dealing with some adversity here. Hopefully it's one of those things where it's like the season comes and everything looks great, and we don't even think about how tumultuous the spring was at times.
All right, last burning question on the offensive side. Is Trell Harris going to be a better a better fit alongside Isaiah Satania? So the implication being, last year was Satania and Deion Burks. Is Trell Harris going to be a better player? Is like a 1-2 punch with Satania? I think the idea behind that, Trell Harris is not, he's a bigger bodied guy. He looks a lot bigger on film than he actually is. When I first started watching, I think I talked about this before. I thought he was like 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", but I think he's like closer to 6'2". But he just plays a little bit bigger than that. He's not like a burner like Deion Burks is supposedly, even though we only saw it a handful of times actually in game action. But
hey, man,
good question.
Deion Burks ran like a 4.3 at the combine. So did Robert Spears Jennings.
Yeah. Yeah. So is Trell Harris going to be a better fit alongside Isaiah Satania? My take, if I had to answer that now, I'd say yes. If we're going to compare it to like Deion Burks, then yes. And you can also, you're probably going to throw in Parker Livingston, but that's fine. But yes, I sure, to answer this question, I would say just simply yes. I think it'll be a better fit.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. We heard a lot about Deion, and hey, Deion Burks, he showed off his physical skills at the combine. That's the stuff that we've been hearing for a long time. But said that speed has never translated on the field. He's never looked that fast, and so
a couple of times,
I've gone
maybe
a couple of times, maybe. I go back and I watch. There's a cut up of. It's from like the ACC YouTube channel, but every single one of Trell Harris's catches throughout the season that went for like 5+ yards. They have like a cut up of it. And we'll see. I'm still a little iffy on Trell Harris. I'm not sure if that was the greatest pickup. I don't know. There's his highlights do look nice. He was the leading receiver for Virginia. I worry the production still for me is not necessarily there. He's only 5 touchdowns. He had a monster game against a terrible Stanford team that accounted for like a pretty decent chunk of his numbers. Like he had 3 touchdowns in that game. And so we'll see. I don't know. And he's hurt. He hadn't practiced at all this spring. So for as good as I feel about Trell Harris, or for as like iffy as I feel about Trell Harris, I feel the opposite about Parker Livingston. I think Livingston has the ability to straight up just be their best receiver, even over Isaiah Satania. So we'll see what happens there. But he's also out. He hasn't really been practicing. In fact, the entire wide receiver room is decimated. Decimated is not the right word because like nobody's out for the season or anything like that. But Trail Harris hasn't been practicing. Livingston hasn't been seen the last few practices. Elijah Thomas has been out a vast majority of the spring. That's a guy that they like. That in a perfect world, Elijah Thomas just develops and turns into like your best receiver in general on the team. It's hard to do that when you can't get on the field. So because of injury. So we'll see. Not a whole lot of time with the number like John Mateer and the number one offense being able to throw to his top receivers. Just hasn't happened. I don't think Satania is hurt. I think that's more of a load management thing.
Yeah, I
But
think a lot of it is probably
yeah.
that. They're not taking it very seriously. I mean, they're just like, yeah, it's spring. It's kind of the same way you and I. I mean, we're taking the spring off as well.
here's a little bit of a side thing. I've been thinking because like I follow this stuff. I see that there's guys been out. There's guys been banged up and everything. And I started to think, and I'm the not the first person to have this thought, but I still think that in the future, I think spring practice for college football is just going bye-bye in general. I don't think it's gonna, especially as the sport shifts to more of a professional sport where everybody is getting paid. I think people are gonna start. There's gonna be someone who just decides like, hey, I'm still on the team, I'm playing in the fall, but I'm sitting out the spring. And it's going to be well publicized, and from there, it's just going to be a wave, and a lot of people are going to start to do it. And I just because right now it's like, what is my 3 burning questions for Oklahoma's offense during spring practice? 1, can they stay healthy? 2, can they stay healthy? 3, can they stay healthy? That's all I care about. Just don't have no season-ending injuries, please.
I think it's a hot take. I don't think that's going to happen because spring is going to essentially just turn into the time for practice for
like
the young
OTAs.
guys. Well, it's like
Sure.
like the rookies, like that. Like all the veteran players are going to be like that here. Like they're just going to hang out. They'll be around. Like they're in college. They got nothing else to do. It's only like for a month or so. So I don't think it's going to go away. But yeah, like as far as the strategy and like actual practice time and stuff, like I think we're seeing evidence that like the big name guys, you're just getting them walk through some reps, make sure that they're staying healthy, make sure that they're hitting the weight, their weight room and nutrition, all that stuff. But then like the younger guys, I bet like all the freshmen, like they're probably super excited. Like, yeah, we're on campus. Like this is fun. And they can learn the defense and the offense and stuff like that. So I think missing out on that, like you mentioned OTAs in the NFL, that's a thing in the NFL. Like essentially spring ball is a version of that. So I'd be surprised if just it totally goes away at some point.
Yeah. And you got guys like David Stone and Jaden Jackson. I don't want them practicing right now. And I know Jaden Jackson got us, but they don't need to be doing anything. They just need to be, working out, making sure that because they're fine, they're good. I mean, honestly, the same goes for guys like Taylor Wine and all those. I don't need you practicing. Just they're obviously vocal, obviously. But you got to keep your top line guys healthy, especially on the defensive side of the ball, which we're going to transition to right now.
All right. March 24th, more from Ryan Chapman. 3 burning questions for the defense going into spring practice. Question number 1, will Owen Heinecke be a Sooner in 2026? We will hit on that later in the show. Question number 2, who will be the next Taylor Wine? That's a fun question. I'll be honest.
Wyatt Gilmore, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Nigel Smith, Danny Okoye, take the leap. I think Okoye is kind of the easy prediction going into year 3.
What qualifies as the next Taylor Wine? Is it just like the defensive lineman who has been in the program for multiple seasons that just sort of like in the old college football classic sense was there for 2 or 3 years and developed and then turned into like an all conference level player the very first year that he actually got an opportunity? Who the next person is? I mean, I don't know. I think it's probably one of that's probably Trent Wilson or Nigel Smith would be the easy answers to that. Okoye, maybe, but I thought we saw more. We saw quite a bit of Okoye last year, though. Like he's already very entrenched, like in the rotation. We're going to see a ton of him this year. But I mean, we didn't see any of Trent Wilson and Nigel Smith, so I think it would probably be one of those guys. Or I mean, Wyatt Gilmore is the funny one. I mean, they're basically
Yeah. Well, in the spirit of the reason I Okoye, because we did see him, but we didn't see that much of him last year, and so I think it still would be like if he's able to come in and essentially be like Taylor Wine was last year, like an entrenched starter or a guy that gives you a ton of snaps a game. That would be like, dang, like great. But sure, I mean, and off the edge too. But yeah, I mean, I would love it if it's a guy on the inside, like Smith.
What if it's? Yeah. I mean, I know we've seen this guy pretty extensively for 3 years, but like, man, why not PJ? at a bar. I mean, I still,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
very bullish. I'm very bullish on him. Another guy who has not practiced at all this spring, but honestly, don't need to keep it. He guy is like he's a guy who I think made massive like leaps last year, and just like his limited playing time. Guy just sets the edge so well on which is super important, especially when you play like sort of like outside type teams. So could be him. I mean, they got some. They do not have as many options on the defensive line as they did last year, but I still think like it was sort of uniquely awesome how many good options that they had on the D line last year. You don't need the type of depth they had last season to be really, really good on the D line. You do got to stay healthy though.
All right, next question, final question of the defense. What kind of depth can Brandon Hall build at safety? And yeah, safety is certainly a problem position group on paper going into this year. When you go into the season and your two top guys, one of which is incredibly unproven, in Michael Boganowski. Peyton Bowen's good. We've seen a lot of him, but if Boganowski is your next guy, that's problematic in my opinion on paper. Hopefully, he ends up improving and becomes a guy that can do more than just be a heat-seeking missile and uh,
I mean,
be a run stopper.
he played a lot last year, and I mean, it was happening a lot. I mean, he was coming in and they were pulling Spears Jennings a ton and putting in Boganowski, and it kind of seemed like, I mean, you could argue, and you maybe even convince me that Boganowski was better than RSJ last year.
Mm,
Um, I still
no,
think he's. I think
I guess both
he's.
of them struggled in pass coverage.
I was gonna say, I think Boganowski is potentially a liability in pass coverage, but it's not. He's big and he moves really, really well. So
Mm-hmm. He
I
does.
think you could do a whole hell of a lot worse. That you have a Peyton Bowen like who obviously put together his best season at OU. I mean, the second half of last season he was terrific, and then he's got a lot of experience there. And then the guy next to him is a dude who didn't start any games last year, but played starter snaps. I think that's experience that's back. It could be way worse, is what I'm saying. But yeah, I'm a little weary of his ability in pass coverage. And then the guys behind him are just sort of we're not really sure. I think your Reggie Powers, I think right now is going to be your cheetah, your starting cheetah. He's definitely more of a box player and a blitzer from the edge than we've seen as a guy in coverage. And then after that, you got a guy like Omarion Robinson who played a little bit a season ago, but you're definitely relying on him
Yeah.
to take a pretty big step because he's going to have to. I think right now he's in the two deep unless a guy like Jeremiah Newcomb they put at safety, but he's so small that I just like I keep hearing of it like a guy like Jeremiah Newcomb and how like he's going to be a pretty big piece of this defense. He's got a pretty tight ceiling just because God, he's just so tiny.
Well, he switched positions? Didn't he come in as a corner?
Yeah, I think right
I think
now
he
it's
came in
like
as a
they're
corner.
yeah, I think people have been seeing him at a bunch of different positions in the spring. I think he's been playing some cheetah, he's been playing some safety,
Oh,
maybe some
okay.
corner as
Okay.
well. So, but yeah, I mean, they got
Well,
guys
yeah.
who need to develop and need to step up because they didn't, unless I'm mistaken, I don't think they brought in any safeties in the portal. So
Yeah, I wonder if they're gonna. Yeah, I wonder if we'll end up seeing like a corner move or something that they because Mario Robinson's an interesting one because I was reliably informed at times last year that he was getting snaps and playing. I don't remember ever seeing him play snaps like meaningful snaps. I'm sure maybe like in some the
he was
temple
he was
and whatnot, but
yeah he was
I don't
playing
ever
like
remember him in there.
in SEC games. I mean, he was playing like 5 or 6 snaps a game
Hmm.
ish. So he was getting out there every now and then. I didn't really notice him either, but that's still valuable. I mean, you're out there, you see the bullets
Yeah.
fly, and so. But yeah, if they're relying on Omarion Robinson to be like their other safety opposite Peyton Bowen, then yeah, I think you start to get some pretty intense heartburn. But a guy like Boganowski, I still think right now is. I think there's enough there where you can reasonably hope that he's going to take a step and become just a really nice player. He's such a good athlete. He just moves so well that
Well,
who's to say
yeah.
that he can't get a lot better?
Well, I hope Teddy Lehman's right about him. It
I don't
was a
think
couple
like
years ago, and
I
hope
don't
Teddy
think
Lehman. He
Boganowski
said he's
is
going to be a great player, so
I
hope
don't
he's
think
right.
Boganowski is bad. I think Boganowski at the very worst is a really good tackler, really good against the run, and pretty iffy against the pass, which
No, so that's my thing is like that's I don't think he's bad either, but my main issue is that safety is a lot easier of a position when if you're just mainly focusing on one part of it. And that's Boganowski, based on what we've seen on the field seems to be a run stopper and key on the run, like wants to come up and help against the run more so than the pass. And now where it gets more difficult is actually being a safety that can do it all. And you have to be able to read your keys and watch film and understand run, pass, and be good at both. So that's my issue with it. Is like it's really good to be, in my opinion, it's good to be. It's easier to be really good at one aspect of safety, which he's really good at stopping the run and coming up and being a run supporter. But he's not very good against a pass because he can get burned. His eyes get lost in the backfield. I think it's easy to be a guy that's good at keeping everything in front of you, being good against the pass, but then you miss out on filling gaps and holes and alleys to come in and help against the run, which hurts your defense. It's a lot harder to put it all together, and that's what he's got to do. And hopefully, during the spring and the fall, he can be a guy that can be a much better guy and see it with his eyes and be a better guy in pass coverage. As I take a drink. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and speed ahead because we've hit on a lot of these other headlines. It's not necessary. I will say, just because I had some concerns about Jake Michla, one of the headlines is, I believe Brady, our friend Brady, wrote about Jake Michla. So it sounds like that the weird infection he had at the end of last year is all good. He says he feels even better in a way. So good news
it
that
sounds
Michla
like
seems to be back healthy.
Yeah, he's been full go. Sounds like throughout spring, which is nice. He's terrific in pass protection, which in this day and age of football, that's what I care about the most for the offensive lineman. To make sure that guys cannot blow past you. And you know what?
Yeah.
They were, for as inconsistent and as bad as the offensive line was, especially in the run game last year at times, I thought in pass protection they were, for the most part, pretty good for having for having two true freshmen and a redshirt freshman start and play a majority of the snaps.
All right. Let's go to April 7th. So just about 5 days ago, Venables confirmed the injury to Xavier Robinson. So we had talked about this already, but Venables said that he had a little strain back on March 28th and that Xavier was in a boot a couple days later. So it seems like I'm not. This has probably been confirmed. He's done for spring. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And then you mentioned all the receivers that have been banged up apparently a few days ago. I think our friend Brady was out there with some observations from spring practice, the 8th spring practice, and 5 wide receivers were not there. Jermichael Carter, Parker Livingston, Elijah Thomas, Trell Harris, and Isaiah Satania. So that brings us to looking ahead to the spring game, which is next Saturday, the 18th. I just don't like. I get the question, like, how much is John Mateer going to play in this game? Like, is he going to play much? What do you think?
Well, okay. So first of all, you mentioned those
whatever
5,
you want to talk about.
You mentioned those 5 receivers there. If you're keeping score at home, those are your on paper your top 5 wide receivers on the roster. Those are your 5 guys going into the year. None of them practiced. I hope that is low. I mean, we already know with Trell Harris, Elijah Thomas, Jermichael Carter, I think was seen in a boot, or like they're actually hurt. Parker Livingston, I'm not sure. That was kind of him being banged up. That was sort of a new thing. He had been out there all of spring. Satania, we think, is load management. We don't think he's hurt at all. But yeah, I kind of want, seeing as that passing game is really reliant on timing and just repping the same routes over and over again. Yeah, I kind of wish the top 5 guys were out there. So, but they're not. And I guess, maybe I just hope it's not a 3rd straight year of just a ton of injuries in the wide receiver. A 3rd straight year of the offense just being so banged up. I hope that's not what we're looking at. Hopefully they're just getting it all out of the way right now. But yeah, going to the spring game. Hey, remember last year when we had this whole conversation about like, oh God, the spring game is going away. It's not a thing anymore. And they just bring it back after 1 year. This is a bad idea. Why are they playing a spring game?
Why not?
Guys can get hurt.
Yeah,
no reason to get hurt.
They didn't do it last year, right? Because of the worries of people like transferring and stuff. But like now that the second window,
I guess
no
that's
there,
I suppose
that's the biggest
is that
reason
like
why they're bringing it back, and plus they can make some
okay.
money.
Sure. Okay, so I suppose them bringing it back after the spring portal window was eliminated. Perhaps that's an admission that that is the main reason why they canceled it a season ago. That's silly. That's dumb. There was no like it's.
They're also following along with everybody else. I guess
Yeah,
I
that's
don't know
true.
this.
I just
I haven't looked into it. Have other schools that got rid of it last year brought it back for this year like
I'm not
OU? I
sure.
guess I don't know.
I'm not sure.
This is
I
great
just like
podcasting. I know.
it was weird last year. I think we had this whole thing about like, oh yeah, it's a but I think my opinion on it was essentially it's like, yeah, it's sort of like a sad thing just because that is just where the sport is going and everything, but also it's probably a good thing that it's going because there's no reason to do it other than like I think making money is really the only reason to do it at this point in time. And to maybe give your guys like a little bit of reward at the end of spring. Hey, you get to play in front of a relatively large crowd. I get that, but I just like I'm depth is so much smaller. It's just like at every program, and most programs don't
Yeah.
have a ton of depth anymore. And I just putting them in any sort of situation where they can get hurt in a whatever setting is to me. I don't want it right now. I just like what if Lloyd Avant breaks his leg? What
Yeah.
do you do at running back? What do you do at running back?
Well, that's the thing is like maybe that's what we're learning about this spring is all the guys that are taking load management, to use an NBA term as you've been using. You know, maybe Mateer's not going to play much. Then it's like, maybe we can kind of see what Bo Bentley looks like. You know, like,
But
okay,
Mateer's gonna have the blue jersey though, so it's not he's not gonna
yeah,
get
that's
hit.
true. He's fine. That's a good
So
point.
it's fine if
But they'll
Mateer
both be playing.
plays. But
But to the running backs, though, I think that's to me like the most interesting thing about this game because Blaylock and Robinson are not available. So I do kind of want to see what the running backs look like because going back to what we talked about earlier in the show and we've talked about a million times at running back, you can see pretty early on, do they have it? Do they have any juice? They look good. Go back to the spring game years ago, the 2017 spring game or 2018 spring game. Kennedy Brooks looked to me like pretty darn good in the spring game.
18.
Yeah, and he ended up being one of the better guys on the team. It's like you can see it right away. And now with the new running backs coach, I'm curious to see what Avant, Hatton, and Walker look like. But to your point, yeah, I don't want to see them get injured, considering the top two guys on paper are already banged up and tend to be injured. At seemingly, even though Blaylock's young, he had an injury-plagued freshman season, and he's already nursing an injury right now. So
we'll see. I stay healthy, because I mean, you know, we've done the little post spring game things every time, and I feel like the last 4 or 5 when we've done, we've sort of had the same. It's like, yeah, it's kind of interesting the first 3 or 4 drives, and then then it's a slog, just a total slog. Because you're watching practice.
Yeah, no. Maybe that'll be maybe they'll make sure they go shorter or something and not make it too long. But people are paying for this though, so people need to get their money's worth. Like I think the ticket prices are actually, I mean, they're not like crazy expensive, but it's like over $10, I think, to get in. So I don't know. Okay. Well, I mean, I just, as you can tell, I don't have a whole lot of thoughts on the spring game. Like, I don't know what to expect. I think Gabe and Teddy's podcast dropped this morning, and they probably have like an hour of thoughts. And good on you guys. I just cannot imagine. I just cannot imagine doing and thinking like how any of this is going to play out. But
I do think there's
okay.
like, you know, you have, you know, Bo Bentley is an interesting. I've seen all the same videos everyone else has. Yes, he when he is letting it rip and throwing a football, he looks a lot better than John Mateer. Like a lot better than John Mateer.
Oh,
I think there's
okay.
just in terms of like what a quarterback is supposed to quote unquote look like. He just does. But that's just like his throwing motion, just how smooth he is. That you know, I doubt he's a better athlete than Mateer. But so yeah, I mean, watching him I think is interesting. But then again, if he's not throwing to any of the top 5 receivers, you know, who knows? So one guy that I do, because he's been kind of getting some headlines the last week or so since some of the receivers been out. But the transfer from Washington State, Mackenzie Allen, like I actually have watched some of his practice cut ups and everything. He does look good. He looks sudden, quick. And we'll see. Jashir Rogers is also a guy who has kind of stood out to me when I watch some of those things. A guy who just moves really well and doesn't look like athletically he looks like he belongs. And Aline does too. But then again, the guy was a walk-on at Washington State who didn't even play at all until the bowl game. Had a huge bowl game. Was running by guys in the bowl game. But
okay.
but also that's a college football bowl game now that isn't an important one. So who knows what he was going against? So we'll see. But I think people have already kind of started to joke around that he's like, you can basically wrap it up. He's going to be the MVP of the of the spring game.
I think
I don't know.
the Bo Bentley thing is interesting because now I'm just drawing back from other old spring games. Quarterback is something you can see quarterback kind of early. Granted, I did think Jackson Arnold looked pretty good given what we knew, and he ended up not
Jackson
being good.
Arnold
So
does look really good when he identifies the right guy to throw to and is accurate. He looks great.
well,
But
and
again,
we'd
maybe
already
that's
seen
everybody.
Jackson in the bowl game the previous year too, going for the spring game, and he played relatively well given aside from a handful of mistakes. But what I'm going to get at though is that we did see Michael Hawkins in that 2024 spring game, and you and I watched it and we're just like,
Oof.
I don't get it. I don't see it. And that proved to be correct. So the only thing that I was wrong about after that is I was skeptical of his arm strength. His arm strength is
Got a
incredible.
rocket. He's got a
I
freaking
was wrong about
rocket.
that. Because to me, it didn't really show up in that spring game. But as time went on, yes, his arm is insane. I still think that he should think about potentially transitioning over to baseball because I'd love to see how fast he can throw as a pitcher. Good God, like the ball just explodes out of his hand like effortlessly.
The problem
Just
with
he has
that
no
is
idea where
that
it's going.
the problem with that is that baseball is exceptionally hard. Probably a little
Yeah,
too late to the
but as a
game.
pitcher, you know,
Yeah.
anyways, yeah. But Michael Hawkins will be definitely one to as the season gets here and we see how West Virginia is looking. Like,
Yeah, that's going
very
to be an
intrigued.
interesting. That's going to be an interesting. Like that's a. I will be very interested to see how he does there because it's a Rich Rodriguez thing. They're probably going to ask him to run a lot.
Yeah,
But gosh, yeah, that
which
guy's
he's
got a freaking howitzer. Like I that guy, he may have the strongest arm in college football. But God, he just cannot play the position.
oh boy. All right. Anything else on the spring game? Any other thoughts? It's back. I don't know if I'm going to go. Probably won't, but we'll see. We'll see how it's looking on next Saturday.
No, I mean there's always stuff you can say. It's like the new guys. What do they look like in the full uniform? I think is always kind of an interesting thing to look at. Tight ends, maybe. I am kind of interested to see how big, if he plays, how big like Hayden Hansen looks on the field with everyone. Like I've gone back and I've watched some this was when they first picked him up. I went back and watched a little bit of Florida. He looks big on the field. He's a big dude.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of curious to see what that all looks like in practice, but we'll see. I don't know. I'm assuming it's going to be on ESPN Plus. I don't have that subscription right now. So I mean, I don't even know if I'm gonna be able to watch it live, but I'm assuming it'll probably be on YouTube like 20 minutes after it ends.
Yeah, probably. Well, our plan is to have an episode at some point after the spring game to talk about any interesting happenings in that, and also what we'll be talking about in the next episode will be what happens with the Owen Heinecke hearing coming up on Thursday of this upcoming week, the 16th. And so that's what I want to spend the rest of the show talking about. And all of you probably know. So there's an emergency hearing this Thursday, April 16th at the Cleveland County Courthouse. And Owen Heinecke is seeking a preliminary injunction against the NCAA to effectively pave the way for Heinecke to be able to play for the Sooners this upcoming season in the fall. The judge is gonna be Thad Balkman, who is an OU law grad and also an undergrad, went to BYU. And Heineke's situation, we've talked about it on the show before. I've made my opinion clear about where I think Heineke's argument stands and the NCAA's, and I think the NCAA's case is honestly for what this is. The NCAA's case is the winning case. I don't think there's really any question about that. Now, where you get into the weeds, though, is this is a legal situation to where seeking a preliminary injunction doesn't necessarily mean that whatever the winning complete legal case is going to be the case that actually wins in the eye. Wins is not the best term, but in the eyes of the judge, considering the legalities of a preliminary injunction, that may not be enough for the NCAA in this case. And I'm concerned that I already confused everybody with that, so I'll do a better job. we'll start with this. Grant, I went on Brady Trent Through the Keyhole Patreon episode podcast a few weeks back when this news came out and gave my analysis. I'm not a lawyer, made that very clear, but I am interested in the law, and I'm interested in cases like this because go back to, how you get mad at me and Brady gets mad at me and everybody on the show probably gets mad at me whenever we're talking about penalties and NCAA rules within games. And I always go look at the rule book and say, what's the rule say? To me, like, this is not that hard. There's rules for things. Like, if you know the rules, you will not be as mad whenever the rules are implemented the correct way, or whenever you see something go the wrong way, then you can get mad about it. And so that's where my brain is. And so when it comes to the NCAA rules and eligibility, we've talked about this on the show, they're pretty hardline, simple rules in my opinion. And in the Owen Heinecke situation, the NCAA has upheld the rules the entire way through. And in my opinion, based on NCAA rules, Owen Heinecke is out of eligibility and he has no case. But as we've seen with Trinidad Chambliss is the big one, that you can take the NCAA to court and you can use a contract law legal theory of a student athlete being a third party beneficiary to the contract. And at least in the Trinidad Chambliss case, a judge in Mississippi was sympathetic to that argument and granted Trinidad Chambliss an injunction, a preliminary injunction, and now Chambliss is on track to play in 2026. Now, I think that was not the right ruling in that case, in my opinion, based on everything going on. We talked about Trinidad Chambliss's case. In my opinion, I think the judge was sympathetic to Chambliss and his argument of the third-party beneficiary and believed that the NCAA acted in an arbitrary and capricious manner and did not apply their eligibility rules in a fair way to Chambliss. I don't think Chambliss did enough to back up that being the case, in my opinion. So I do think Chambliss got a judge that was worthy, a good judge in that case. Now, look at Chandler Morris. That case has now been resolved. Chandler Morris was trying to get an extra year eligibility as well, trying to essentially, it's a little bit closer, I think, to the Heinecke situation where Chandler Morris was trying to get a medical red shirt for the 2022 season, I believe, whatever the season was where he started as the starting quarterback at TCU and then got his job taken away. And so he played and he ended up getting his job taken, but then he ended up playing more later that year and ended up playing enough games to where there was not, he could not get any sort of red shirt.
So he played over 4 games. Even though with the medical, actually, I'm not sure there's a.
I think this was so maybe that's my mistake. And as you can tell, this needs to be precise, and I apologize for this one not being as precise. I do believe he was seeking a medical red shirt for some sort of medical issues that year, to where the number of games maybe didn't factor in, and the NCAA, like, there's nothing in the NCAA rules that talk about mental health really, and it's pretty clear that the medical red shirt, the medical hardship is for like pretty easy to prove. You tore your ACL, you got an Achilles, man, like you broke your arm and you missed 8 weeks of the year and you really couldn't come back, and it's like, well, you just sat out, fine, medical red, stuff like that. And so what Chandler Morris was effectively trying to argue was that he had enough documentation to earn a medical red shirt to give him an extra year. As we know, Chandler Morris was part of the 2020 class where he got that free COVID year. I think he already redshirted for 1 year, maybe at OU. So like starting 2022, I believe that was like his first year. So like 22, 23, 24, 25, those were his 4 years. And he's trying to get a medical red shirt for that 2022 season. The judge in Virginia did not find his case to be compelling. The judge denied the preliminary injunction, basically saying that the NCAA made the rules, they upheld their rules, and the judge effectively was like, well, this was part of the deal, man. Like, that I'm not going to overrule NCAA rules here. Your argument does not prove that you deserve a medical red shirt based on the NCAA rules. And so that judge denied Chandler Morris. So we've got one judge. And by the way, Chandler Morris, his legal team used that third-party beneficiary legal strategy the same as Trinidad Chambliss. So we've got Chambliss, who won, for lack of a better term. He was granted the injunction, to be more precise. We got Chandler Morris, who was denied. Now we have Owen Heinecke, who is also his legal team. I read the entire brief, the summary of his legal team. We talked about it on Brady's the Patreon podcast. They're also using the third party beneficiary contract law argument as Trinidad Chambliss and as Chandler Morris. And so it worked with Trinidad Chambliss. That was an interesting situation with the medical red shirt that I didn't think Chambliss had a good argument to get, but the judge bought it. Chandler Morris also trying to get a medical red shirt. I don't think a very good case. And the judge was like, nah. So now we have Owen Heinecke, who is now trying to do something different. He's not trying to get a medical red shirt. He's effectively trying to get a red shirt year for 2021 when he played lacrosse. And according to NCAA rules, he played lacrosse, that burned a red shirt. And so here's where we are. It's a scenario where I think it's super interesting because a big reason why is because the coverage of it has been lacking. And I complained about that on one of our older podcasts. But now this week, when people are seemingly starting to learn more about this and the NCAA release their argument of why Heinecke should not be getting a preliminary injunction, which is if you listen to the Patreon podcast with Brady and I, the NCAA's argument is effectively the argument that I laid out on that podcast in a lot of ways. Now you got, like, I'm going to mention, like, the Sooner Scoop podcast this week. You got George and the guys, like, now George all of a sudden is like, oh, I don't know if this is as much of a slam dunk as we thought it was. It's like, nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. We just have more information. And so with that, I've been talking a lot. I'll throw it over to you. We're going to talk about it where I still think that Heinecke, his case is not good, but I do think that there is a very good chance he still could win this, but it all depends on what Judge Balkman, the type of judge he is, what he finds, and we're going to talk more about that because I have some thoughts and notes on that. So after all of that, over to you, Grant. What do you think?
Well, I'll start with my first thought on it was that I don't think OU and his legal team would have pursued this if they did not get assurances that it would be a slam dunk. And so my feeling is that he very likely is going to get this injunction. I think that is a cynical read on the legal system and everything, but I think the cynical read largely in life is the correct read a lot of the time. So I expect him to be granted the injunction. I don't think, like, Owen Heinecke was at the combine, and Heineke's not going to get drafted, but this is a guy who is, like, if he doesn't get this injunction, I mean, his football career is over. Like, it's done. He's not going to get another opportunity after a year off. I just don't think maybe he will. Maybe he'll get, like, invited to a camp or something. But you have right now where it's like he's probably not going to get drafted, but even if he's going to get, as soon as the draft ends, he's going to be one of those undrafted free agents, like, immediately. He's going to get an opportunity to go and play. I'd assume those opportunities would be way less next year if he goes an entire year without playing football. From a monetary career perspective, there's just no way that they go this route if they don't think they have a really good chance of getting this thing. And I think a lot of that has to do with, like, this is OU. They know people. This Thad Balkman guy, he's an OU law grad. Does that mean, and even if he were to rule in favor of Oklahoma, I agree with you. I think the NCAA's case here is pretty open and shut, pretty clear. If you go and read the Owen Heinecke, the argument from his legal team, it's it's very eloquent lawyer BS, but lawyers are trained in BS. This is what they do, and his argument is a creative one for sure. And there are some judges who really like creative arguments. Thad Balkman may be one of them. So it's, I mean, do you want to, like, lay out what the crux of his argument actually is, just so people are aware of it?
Yeah, and I suppose, hold on,
because I could give just like a 50,000 foot overview of it, but
no, yeah. So you're right, and if you didn't listen to the Patreon podcast from Through the Keyhole, you're right. I haven't laid out. Is that what you're saying? Lay out the case of
just very, very quickly, like, because it's like a 20-page report. It was like they're filing with the court in Cleveland County. And the first half of it is a bunch of just appeals to emotion. I think poorly written appeals to emotion, to be honest with you. I'm sure some poor law student wrote those, and he's just not very good. but then it gets actually to the crux of everything where it gets into much more lawyerly arguments and everything. And so it cites NCAA bylaws about people, essentially about events outside of the control of a player. And so their argument is essentially that when Owen Heinecke walked on to play lacrosse at Ohio State, when he got the scholarship to play lacrosse at Ohio State, he accepted that scholarship with the assumption that he was also going to have an opportunity to walk on to the Ohio State football team. Well, because of the COVID pandemic in 2020, Ohio State decided not to hold walk-on tryouts in the fall of 2021. And their argument is essentially because of the COVID pandemic, he did not get that opportunity to walk onto the Ohio State football team. If he would have been given that opportunity, he has just proven from his time at Oklahoma that he would have been able to make that team. And if he did make that team in the fall of 2021, had tryouts been held, that he would have been granted some sort of red shirt because those the 4-game college football eligibility rules would have applied to him. That's their argument. It's it's BS. It's clearly it's starting from what you want them to rule and working backwards, obviously. So very obviously that's the case. But also a lot of the time in civil law, which this is not legal. None of this is all just civil contract law. Sometimes you're rewarded with creative, unique interpretations of the law.
No, that's a good breakdown of that, and you're right. And part of the NCAA's medical hardship or hardship rules for red shirts involve situations where a player was deprived of something outside of their control, which is what they're going for. And this is something that I did not, whenever I was thinking of Heineke's argument, I did not even consider that. So their legal team found this, and like the reason why, one, I'm not going to say I didn't consider it on purpose. I didn't really, but the reason why I think this is a terrible argument is because there's really easy ways to combat that argument. And number one, the easy one is that Heinecke was never on the Ohio State football team. Like there's no evidence in his petition. He doesn't cite any sort of discussion with Ohio State's football coaching staff about being a walk-on or getting the opportunity to play. So I think this argument is really stretching the claim that the claim of opportunity to play football. I think that's stretching it big time because there's no, like, I feel like if he had talks with an assistant coach at Ohio State, or like there's an email, like they would have included that, like, hey, Owen, we'd love to have you come to tryouts. Like, can't wait to see you. There's none of that in their petition. So to your point, they're hoping that him making the Oklahoma football team is like enough evidence, like, oh, he definitely would have made the Ohio State football team if they would have had it too, which that's an assumption.
Which in abstract that makes sense, but you're right. I think the problem with Heineke's legal argument is that it's making far too many assumptions where you have to read minds. And it'd be one thing if there's a ton of emails between him and the Ohio State coaching staff saying, yeah, come walk on, we'd love to have you, and then a last documented thing saying like, hey, I'm sorry, we're not holding tryouts this year. They might have a case in that regard. Like that actually may be and so
be a lot stronger.
Exactly. But like there's two major assumptions that are kind of they're not necessarily leaps of faith because we know that he was an all-conference level performer at an SEC program. But they say, hey, he was going to play football at Ohio State. Okay, how do we know that? You're just saying that. That's a post hoc thing that you're, like I have no idea. And also, would he have made the Ohio State football team? We think it's reasonable to assume that he would have based on his future success at OU, but we don't know that. We have no clue. And so
but what you just said though was important. You said it's reasonable, and since this is a preliminary injunction hearing, Heineke's team, and this is there was a lawyer that listened to the Through the Keyhole Patreon podcast that had a reply and wasn't a big fan of my analysis of the case, which is fine. Like I'm not going to sit here and it's a fool's errand to argue with a lawyer because I don't have a law degree and this person does. So, and he makes a good point. He makes that this is in this particular proceeding, Heinecke does not have to prove all the way through like this case is good. They need to prove enough to get a preliminary injunction. And so, to your point, if the judge thinks it's reasonable that Heinecke would have made the Ohio State football team, then maybe the judge will think, well, all right, maybe that's enough for this injunction to be warranted. That okay, like maybe
And
if
if
it
he
gets
were to
appealed, it won't win on appeal. But for now, it might extend the clock.
if he were to do that, like the play essentially would be, hey, like this, I hear you, I hear both sides, but the person here, this guy right here, actually has, this is an interesting argument, and I want to hear more. So I'm going to give you the injunction, and there you go. You can go to discovery, you can do more stuff. Like, I think that's likely what's going to happen here. That's how, as a lawyer, you stay seemingly intellectually honest, and you say, there's enough here for me to say, let's see some more. Let's actually have you put together a case. That is what they are hoping for, because that takes resources, time. You can run out the clock, and the football season will have already happened. That's the cynical play. That's what Trinidad Chambliss is doing. And from what I know about the Chambliss case, Chambliss has a better argument than Heinecke does, because Chambliss's thing is that the documentation of his injury is not very good. He didn't play those games that year. Like, he actually, from what he was saying, if the documentation was better, his case would be kind of a cinch. But the documentation is bad; it's not there. So, and it's probably BS. Yeah. He probably wasn't hurt, season-ending injury.
Because Chambliss was practicing, he was available. Like basically, he wasn't the starter.
He didn't play. Yeah, he'd already used a red shirt. And he just didn't play that year. But they were basically they were trying to create an injury in retrospect. Which honestly, like I think that case is probably way more arguable than Heinecke's is, which I think is so straightforward. But also that's where you get that, the creative, interesting argument about the COVID stuff. And it's very, I mean, they're looking for anything. They're looking for anything to throw against the wall. And that's the route they're going. So I do want to, because from a legal perspective, and this is a guy who, like, I think, gosh, and from where the sport is going, I think eligibility at some point in time is just going to be rendered illegal, that the NCAA can't tell people that's where this is going. And so from that perspective, and I don't think that's good. I think eligibility, only being able to be in college for 4 or 5 years, is one of the things that makes college football unique and what gives it its charm. And if that goes away, I think that's a bad thing. In a vacuum, though, as a guy who is the host of a OU football podcast, I really, really want Owen Heinecke to win this case. I want him to be on the team. I'm sorry. Like, I want Oklahoma to win a national championship. I want a natty. I don't care if you got to do a cynical court filing, whatever, to win I don't care. Do it.
Sure. And I mean, and that happens, and we get to, June, July, and August, we start talking about the season. And if Heineke's playing and Chambliss is playing, then you have that talk about, what is the NCAA going to do something? Like, I don't know, like, because they deemed him ineligible, and like, but we got plenty of time to talk about that. But here's a part of this that I haven't even brought up yet. I thought about bringing it up with Brady, but I forgot, and I haven't heard anybody talk about this. But part of back to the, hey, Heinecke took a lacrosse scholarship with the thought that he also was going to walk on for the football team the previous fall. So the fall, and then play lacrosse in the spring. Let's say he would have been able to walk on, makes the team. He redshirts for football. He still played lacrosse. He still burned a red shirt for lacrosse. It's not very clear in NCAA rules where, even if he technically would have been able to get a red shirt for football, he still competed in a sport that same calendar year, or that same year, and burned a red shirt. I don't know how that would factor in. Like, and that's, I think, that's part of the NCAA's argument as well. Is like, Heinecke competed in lacrosse. He played, what I'm saying? So, like,
he didn't burn a red shirt. He just wasn't able to get one. That was because lacrosse, if you step on the field for 1 second, you burn you're not a freshman anymore. You're a sophomore now.
Well, yeah, he burned his red shirt by playing.
He burned his red shirt the year that he got hurt at OU. That's the year he burned his red shirt.
No, like the lacrosse year. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Yes, You're right.
Remember remember it's a two-step
when
process. You have
to be
to
more
give
precise.
Yeah.
To be more precise, him playing lacrosse took away his opportunity to get a red shirt
to
for
get a red
that
shirt.
year.
Yes, that
Sorry,
is it.
I was saying it the wrong way.
Sure, because it's the two-step process. In order for which this isn't a thing anymore because the NCAA has denied him twice, so they're already saying no, we're not doing this. But in order for it to, because the original denial and the appeal got denied as well, and so remember it had to be a two-step process. Whereas right now, he was being granted a red shirt for that first year at OU in 2022, where he got hurt, didn't play the entire season. What they really need is they need to retroactively grant him a red shirt for that first year of lacrosse at Ohio State. They're hoping essentially that they treat him like a football player and give him the 4-game grace. He didn't play 4 games in lacrosse. Grant him a red shirt that year, and then you fast forward to 2022 and change that regular red shirt into a medical red shirt. That is what they needed to happen. The NCAA has already said no, that's not happening. And so their legal argument, I think, is totally different. They're not even saying he should get a red shirt for this. They're basically just saying that this
arguing
year,
like he should get an extra year. Like they're making it very
well.
clean.
I mean, they are arguing that if not for COVID, Owen Heinecke would have been a walk-on on the Ohio State football team, and he would have been able to take a red shirt for eligibility purposes that season because he would. God, another assumption. Who knows? Like, are we sure if he was a walk-on? Do we know that he wouldn't have played? Maybe he would have played in 7 games. I don't know.
Yeah, and effectively, what? Yeah, to your point, yeah, they're basically saying, hey, that 2021 year, that should be move 2021 to 2026 and give him this year to play that year. That's so the Heinecke's argument is getting around that process that you mentioned of like, all right, he gets the red shirt for 2021. Now he's got to get a medical red shirt. Like their petition didn't even mention any of that. They're just like, hey, basically he just because of 2021, Heinecke deserves an extra year, clean. So
yeah,
but let me get to like think about Kyler Murray when he played baseball and football. So let's say Kyler in 2017 season, I can't remember how many games he ended up playing that year. If he was under 4, I can't recall. But let's say
it was over. It was over. He played a lot of games.
Okay, well let's say Kyler only played 4 games in 2017 when they had. I think they didn't have the 4-game rule yet. I think that came on maybe like a year or 2 later. So, anyways, for the purposes of this argument, let's say Kyler would have been able to hold a redshirt opportunity, and for football in 2017, but in baseball in 2017 in the spring he played like a lot of baseball, and he could not have a red shirt or claim a red shirt for baseball. Like he was using that. Does that 2017 school year, academic year, does that count as him playing? Whereas like, could he claim a red shirt for football and keep an extra year to play football down the line? And that's kind of what we get in with Heinecke too, is like, because Heinecke, he wants to effectively keep like red shirt for that first year at Ohio State as a football player, but he didn't play football.
Like, I'm a football player. 99.5% of my college career has been as a football player. It would have been 100% of my career if not for COVID.
And this is part of, and Heinecke's petition acknowledges this part of the NCAA rules. And this is what I think is the best argument that we've laid out, is like trying to say, hey, the NCAA rules around red shirts are not consistent. It's not fair. Football and wrestling have different rules than everybody else. That's unreasonable. Therefore, I think that my short amount of time playing lacrosse, that should count as a red shirt because you guys have already acknowledged, the NCAA, Heinecke's legal team should say, NCAA, you've already acknowledged that there's a couple of sports where you're allowed to play limited action and still keep a red shirt, football and wrestling. So it's not fair that other sports don't have that same standard. Therefore, I should get a red shirt. The problem with that argument, though, and I think why Heinecke's team is not using that as their predominant argument, is because you're effectively asking the NCAA to change a rule. And we've talked about that already on the show. Like that, and what they're trying to do, Heinecke's legal team, they're trying to argue within the scope of the rules to get this done, which is smart. But now back to, so let's go forward. So you laid out the opportunity to play thing about how like maybe he could have made the football team in 2021. as a walk-on, but they didn't have tryouts. Therefore, Heineke's legal team is arguing that, hey, like that out of Heineke's control, he missed out on an opportunity to play football there. Therefore, Heineke deserves an extra year based on NCAA rules. Now, here's where that argument just is destroyed. And the NCAA uses this in their response. And I brought this up on the Patreon podcast with Brady. Heineke's legal team is arguing that he did not have the opportunity to play football. In his petition, in Heineke's petition, he lays out opportunities to play college football in his petition. He just wasn't happy that he wasn't getting any Power 4 opportunities to play football. And he does not make that. The legal team in the petition does not make it clear that he did not have an opportunity to play Power 4 football. He just says an opportunity to play football in general. Heineke got offers from Army, Navy, Northeastern State, and UCO. Okay, that's obviously service academies, Division II. Like it's not, it's not even a group of 5. But he did receive offers to play football. If that was his main thing, which is what Heineke's arguing, I just want to play football. Like my thing is that if your legal team is going to argue that you were deprived of an opportunity to play football based on something out of your control, it's not a good look in your petition when you're admitting that 4 schools recruited you to play football, but you chose not to play football and you chose to go and play lacrosse and take a lacrosse scholarship. I think that alone blows up this argument for Heineke. Like he did have an opportunity to play football. He just chose not to. Thoughts on that?
I mean, I agree with you. I think the NCAA eligibility rules, especially for football, are actually as you've detailed in this podcast and other podcasts, are actually pretty clear and are applied pretty evenly across the board. I think especially I think they've been applied even more evenly since the COVID has happened. They before the free transfer stuff, they were way more arbitrary and way more it was just is a flip of the coin whether or not how they woke up on which side of the bed that morning, whether or not how they were going to rule. That was before the COVID eligibility and the free transfer stuff. I think it's been way clearer since the free transfer rule has come into effect. Because you bring up the Kyler Murray stuff, right? Because that was all before the 4-game stuff. Kyler transferred here after his first year at Texas A&M, and he had to sit out a year, and that was a year of eligibility. He didn't retain any eligibility there. So 2017 when he was the backup, that was just his junior year of college in general. And then 2018 was a senior year because he was 15 through 18. He was just a 4-year guy, 4 to play 4 guy, or 4 to play 3 after he had to sit out a year. So, I don't know. I think in a lot of areas of lawyerly stuff, I think Heineke's argument is too cute by half. It's very cute, but I think it's obviously BS. But that's the thing. I mean, lawyers are trained in this stuff, and I'm not a lawyer.
And you said at the very beginning when you started talking that, hey, you think it's reasonable that Oklahoma, Heineke's family, and I'm sure to some extent OU, even though they're not really allowed to be involved in this, the team and the school, that
they are.
They wouldn't have gone.
Are.
Right.
To say that they're not is ridiculous.
Right, but officially they're not really supposed to be. That they would not have gone this route if they were not given some sort of and you didn't say it this way, but behind the scenes assurances that we like your case, we think you're going to get it. Which if that's the case, man, that's the world we live in. But here's the thing. So here's basically what this is all about. This whole case, just to break it down to a simple, and this is taking into account, I mentioned on the Through the Keyhole Patreon how there was a lawyer who replied and took issue with my analysis. And so this is taking that into account as well. This whole thing is about, it's not just about eligibility. It's about whether the court system and judges are going to start recognizing athletes as third-party beneficiaries of NCAA contracts. And that's a relatively new legal theory and strategy, and there's not a consistent precedent for that. There was one judge, the Trinidad Chambliss case, that bought it, but the Chandler Morris judge in Virginia did not buy it. And now we're on to Thad Balkman. Will he buy it? And what I want to talk about, and you're not going to get this anywhere else, I bet. It's like, okay, well, what's Balkman like? You hear, I know Barry Trammell had a story about Balkman in the Tulsa World, basically saying that he's not in the pocket of OU. He's his history of ruling and just as a person, like it's not a rubber stamp done deal that he's going to find in favor of whatever Oklahoma is trying to get. In this case, Owen Heinecke, a preliminary injunction. So there's that. There's also, I saw a Norman transcript article mention that Balkman ruled against Oklahoma, the university, in like 2015 as they were building, they're adding on to the stadium. It was something with construction that Balkman ordered Oklahoma to stop construction for some reason. I didn't get any, but so it was a situation where it's like, oh, he went to OU as a law, but like he's down the line and fair. And so my thought is like, all right, we got the judge in the Ole Miss case. We got the judge here with Heinecke. We got the judge in the Chandler Morris case. And what about even the judge for Joey Aguilar, the Tennessee quarterback, who also was denied a couple of months ago? His whole idea, though, was different. I don't believe he used the third-party beneficiary argument. He was essentially trying to get an extra year for his JUCO service. He and Diego Pavia were able to get the NCAA allowed one extra year for JUCO players for, I can't remember the exact reason why, which is why Pavia played this past year and why Joey Aguilar was able to play this past year. Aguilar was trying to get another one, and the judge, I guess the judge initially in Tennessee initially gave him like a 15-day stay, but then eventually overturned it and denied Joey Aguilar. So that case may not be quite the same, but at least it's a situation where I'm guessing a sympathetic judge in Knoxville, Tennessee, didn't just rubber stamp like, hey, yeah, we're going to go ahead and just give you the extra year because I like Tennessee football. That's me reading into it. So the thought, like, I went through and I was like, okay, let's start with Thad Balkman. Like, can we figure out anything about his history and like how he's gonna rule? So I did some digging and I tried to figure out like if I could learn more about him. And so this is one of the more interesting, and I gotta give credit to AI, to Chat GPT, because they can really search things a lot faster. They can consolidate things better. So I found this quote on like Ballotpedia, because Judge Balkman, I think he had to run to be a judge. So like they reached out and they asked him some questions. And so there was a question that Balkman answered. I'm not sure when this was, but probably before he was wherever he is now. And the question was, who do you look up to? Whose example would you like to follow and why? This question was asked to Balkman by this website just to get like more information about him. And Balkman, according to this website, replied, Atticus Finch and Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. So again, it's a small thing, but what that basically says is like, okay, Atticus Finch, it's all about like being fair, but also within the rule of law. And then if you know anything about Neil Gorsuch, which I'm not going to expect you all to be an expert on Neil Gorsuch, current Supreme Court Justice, he's known to be a textualist. Like, what does the law actually say? Which means, in general, skepticism of expanding legal interpretations beyond what the text says and limiting judicial overreach.
Although
so
he does have a history of
going outside a little bit. Yeah,
he does. Yes, and actually, in one very, very high profile one, he has which honestly is also and this is, I mean, Supreme Court law is very much, there's one side of it that is very much all about unique, creative interpretations of the law, which is what Owen Heinecke's situation is. And there's one very high profile example of Neil Gorsuch buying those arguments and it being the deciding vote in a very, very big case.
And
that doesn't really matter. I don't think that really matters. I mean, do we really need to talk about Balkman that much? I know you really love this story and everything. Guy, he's going to get the injunction, everyone. They would not have done this if they did not know that they were going to get the injunction. It would be pretty irresponsible from Owen Heinecke's side to do this if they did not think that they were going to get the injunction.
I think I'm not going to agree with that fully, because I think this was worth the shot either way. Because like you said, he's probably not going to get drafted, and if it doesn't work out for him, then he'll just
this is it. This is it though. His football, if he doesn't get this, his career playing football is done.
He'll get a whatever what's the NFL version of like a preferred walk-on? He'll get a free agent after the what is it? Gosh darn it, I can't think of the name.
UDFA, undrafted free agent.
Undrafted free agent. Thank you. Yeah, like he'll get an opportunity somewhere as a UDFA. Because I agree.
Maybe
I don't
I
think he's
suppose,
drafted
yeah.
either.
Seeing as that this is like, let's say if Balkman next week is just like, yeah, no, I'm ruling in favor of the NCAA. I guess he just goes back and he does his, because it's before the draft. So I suppose.
Well, that's
maybe
why they got the emergency date before the draft, because so that was a big part of it.
So.
But so I do think it's interesting with Balkman, because this to me it comes down to the judge. I think the argument here, again, is very clearly on the NCAA side. But will the judge be open to, one, the fact that it's a preliminary injunction hearing, so this isn't the full case. So Heinecke's legal team doesn't have to argue everything perfectly. They just have to argue enough to get a judge to be like, that's reasonable. Here's an injunction so that it runs the clock even further. But the thing with Balkman, if that's like his read, and like if he's somebody that's more of like looking at contract law, and like, I don't know if I want to be somebody that can essentially rule that can expand that to this relatively new legal theory, or do I really want to be somebody that opens up a huge can of worms? Because this is different than the Chambliss and Morris.
It is. This is quite a bit different. This one's really unique. This is like
this will force the NCAA, if they to basically change the rules. Like, I mean, well, not necessarily,
no,
because
I think the most
they're trying to
thing.
argue within the NCAA rule structure, which, okay, I take that back.
Yeah, like here's my big cynical reading on it. He's going to get the injunction. It's going to go to the Oklahoma Supreme Court. A court date's going to be set for like February of 2027. And as soon as the OU football season is over, Heinecke's side is going to drop the case. That's what's going to happen.
Wait, so say that again. Sorry.
He's going to get the injunction next week. Okay. Everything is going to be appealed to the Oklahoma Supreme Court. They're going to set a court date for like February of 2027. The entire OU football season will be played out with Owen Heinecke as a starter at linebacker the entire year because of the injunction. And as soon as the season is over, Heinecke's legal team will drop the case.
I see your point, but I don't know if that's the case, because let's say they drop the case and they admit that they were basically trying to just get that extra year. What is the NCAA? I mean, do we care about any sort of future NCAA
or maybe I guess maybe
violations for Oklahoma?
I suppose I guess if it goes to the Oklahoma
for Oklahoma
Supreme Court,
allowing an ineligible player to play. That's what we're getting into if we get to that point potentially.
But yeah, I suppose I'm not even sure if it goes to the Oklahoma Supreme Court. I guess I'm not even sure if Heinecke's legal team can even drop the case. I think maybe at that point in time it just kind of is what it is. I guess I'm not exactly sure. But yeah, I have a very cynical read on this. This is all dumb. Heinecke very obviously does not have an extra year of eligibility based on pretty easy to understand NCAA rules. Why this is I think in the larger sense of things, why this is an interesting case is that I do think it brings up the legality of just eligibility rules in general. And I reading like Heinecke's legal team, their what they submitted and everything like that, they're not going after NCAA eligibility rules like totally. They're going after like a very, very narrow like bylaw within the NCAA like, rules and contracts and everything. So they're not actually challenging the legality of eligibility rules. But if Heinecke is able to get an injunction here, somebody will challenge those, because that's already part of our people talking about how the NCAA business model is illegal and everything. And that all goes into it. If their entire business model is illegal, then so is capping eligibility. And that's just like, logically, that's the logical conclusion. And that's a situation where it's when people are talking about how there needs to be like collective bargaining and a union and everything, that's how you get around that stuff. That's why the NFL's rules and stuff like that are binding, is because they have a players union that they can negotiate with. That, college football doesn't have that. It's gonna eventually, there's gonna be one eventually, and it's gonna be a total S show. But
all right, well, let's wrap it up. I know we're kind of to the end of it here, and I'll leave it with this. So you're confident that he's going to get it, just because based off of just the tea leaves, and they wouldn't do this if they didn't get some sort of assurances.
Basic cynicism. Yeah, he's going to get it.
So here's what I want to end this on. It's more on Balkman. Just because I think it's interesting, and I'll give my final prediction here at the end. So just more background on the judge presiding over this. So I believe it was 2020, somewhere in there. Baltman presided over a big opioid case in the state of Oklahoma against Johnson and Johnson. And so his initial ruling was against Johnson and Johnson, a major corporation. It was a big time decision. So in that case, that was a big move. Like obviously he felt like he was making the right call, and that's what he ruled on. The problem is that ruling was later overturned on appeal to the Oklahoma Supreme Court. So whatever Baltman did there, he took a stand. I don't know if he in his head he knew that it was possibly going to get overturned, but he felt like maybe he did something that he thought was right. I don't know, but it got overturned. So the question is now, is he willing to make a big swing? And this isn't as big of that of case as that, obviously, because it's a big drug company. And the NCAA is trying, or I'm sorry, Heinecke is trying to argue within the rules of the NCAA, therefore to make it to where a ruling by the judge would not effectively lead to the NCAA changing the rules. But I just want to point that out, that who knows, maybe the overturn on appeal for that case, who knows if that has anything to do with anything. But what this comes down to, I think, is if Baltman just sees this as simply a contract case and it's all about just the law, I think that this is something where Heinecke should not be granted the preliminary injunction. However, if Baltman wants to see this as a fairness kind of situation potentially, and he wants to give some merit to their argument of like, oh, the 2021, like he did out of his control, then Heineke's got the edge on it. So is Baltman going to just be interpreting the law, or in this case, the rules, the way they are? Or is he going to be willing to go outside of that on some sort of fairness argument? And I don't know the answer to that question. So
I don't either. I also think, though, that Heineke's argument is, I think his argument by the letter of like the NCAA bylaws or whatever is BS. But I think his argument is righteous. I mean, I think it's right. I think I think in a just world, he should be treated as a football player there, because like I still think his best argument is that is genuinely your eligibility rules for football and wressling are 4 games or whatever it is for wrestling, but nothing for anyone else. That is stupid. That doesn't make any sense. Here is like, I think that's his best argument. Like but also that if you do that, you're going after NCAA eligibility rules like per se a lot of the time. So we'll see. I think it's very, very silly that he played in 3 lacrosse games that year and cannot get a red shirt for it. I think it's really silly. That is a very silly rule. But also, it's like, if you dig deeper, I understand it. Like, for those non-revenue sports, it's tougher to keep a bunch of dudes on roster. It's like you want more people to be able to come in, give more people opportunities. So will the NCAA have they argued that, like in court cases? Maybe. I would just, based off of where the sport is going, they haven't done a very good job of arguing it. But it's NCAA. Of course they haven't. They're not very good at many things, except for running a basketball tournament. They're really good at that.
So I will say, I do get the feeling, I don't, the judge should deny the preliminary injunction. This should be easy, but I do get the sense, I kind of agree with you, that there may have been some assurances made. So I tend to lean towards, I think Heineke's gonna get granted the preliminary injunction. Although, I will emphasize, I do not believe that his case warrants it. What Heinecke is going for is part of what the lawyer who responded to the Through the Keyhole Patreon to me, Heinecke is using the preliminary injunction hearing, how the standard is not as high, to where that they don't have to prove the entire case here. They just have to prove enough to get a preliminary injunction. And where the NCAA, it gets even more interesting, is that this third-party beneficiary strategy that Heinecke is using, that Chambliss used, that Morris used, third-party beneficiary contract laws differ from state to state, because the NCAA mentions how in Oklahoma law, like specifically mentions in their response about how Oklahoma law effectively, for lack of a better, because I can't remember exactly what it said, but for purposes of this podcast, the third party beneficiary laws in Oklahoma essentially benefit the NCAA in this scenario where there's not a whole lot of wiggle room there. So that's the NCAA's, like, that's what makes their case a little bit stronger, because maybe those laws weren't as strong in Mississippi. I don't know. Maybe they're similar in Virginia to Oklahoma. Maybe that's why the judge in Virginia was like, well, you're trying to use this, but the laws here are different. So I think it should be something like, 90% chance that the judge rules against Heinecke. But I don't know. Like if human beings and like basically all of the emotion and stuff like that of like prediction, like it should be something like 75-80% going into this that Heinecke will not get the injunction. But it's possible that this Balkman guy in this situation is, maybe he is a guy that in this sense he's like, yeah, I think Heineke's argument's reasonable, and the NCAA, maybe he's got some sort of gripe against the NCAA, and he would never admit it. That would force him to just be like, yeah, no.
I think Heineke's argument is reasonable. Like, you can make logical sense of it. Whether or not it's like a good argument, I think is a totally different question. I think one thing that we haven't necessarily mentioned is that, like, within those NCAA bylaws, and this is within the filing from Heineke's legal team, within those bylaws, there is something in there about treating student athletes with good faith and giving them like opportunity and like shepherding them, like essentially holding their hand through the college process and doing things that are in their best interest, like as one of the highest ideals of the NCAA. And that there's a lot of there's a lot of wiggle room there. There are smart people who can start from the conclusion that they want and work backwards and make it look really clever and really good. And so that's what's happening here. This isn't so we'll see. I hope he gets it. I want him to play football for OU next year. That's my Kip Lewis is already one of the best linebackers in college football. Heinecke was terrific a season ago. They have zero depth at linebacker. I want Heinecke on the team. Period. End of story. That's my number one takeaway from all of this.
Last thing on this, not even about the case. I did listen to one of the more recent Oklahoma Breakdown podcasts. Then they were talking about the linebackers and Heinecke. I was just curious if they had any thoughts on Heinecke. They didn't really talk about the case. But Gabe made it seem like he was just now realizing that, actually, Heinecke might be a lot more important for Oklahoma in 2026 than he originally thought. It's like, what? You're just now? Like, if you listen, it's like you're just like, of course he'd be incredibly. He made it kind of seem like, seeing how much he interacts with the linebackers and during practice and how they just don't, they're young. It's like, I don't know. I had a problem with that because it's like, he's very obviously he would be a huge help for Oklahoma in 2026.
A huge help. Ton of experience to be in his fifth year in the football program. He started all the second half of last year, played a ton of snaps, made a lot of plays last year. And he would call the defense too, or you know what I mean? He would, like, the green dot. Like, he's the guy who would. That's a huge deal. That's a massive deal. Like, getting Heinecke back next year is, I think, a genuinely massive thing. OU has nowhere near as much depth on defense last year. I think their frontline starters going into 26, I think, are objectively better on paper than they were last season. So they can, like, we talk about Mateer being like, what do we want from OU football next year? I think, like, in a reasonable thing, like, you want OU to be better than they were last year. You want them to take a step. You want them to play in the Final Four, like, at the very, and that involves Mateer and the offense getting a lot better. But I also think it means the defense, at the very least, remaining as effective as they were last year, but probably being a little bit better than they were last year, which I think, if they stay healthy, I think that's doable, because they have Heinecke and Kip Lewis. That's going to be in nationally elite in terms of their frontline players at linebacker. I think, like, up the middle of the defense, if you have both those guys, they're going to be really good. And so listen, man, I'm all about results here. I don't care. Even if like Heinecke getting this injunction is wrong, I don't care. I just want to win. This is as
All
far
right.
as like what programs have done to try to get extra wins. Again, this is very at the bottom of the list of like most egregious. Because he should.
All right.
I in a just world, I don't think that those lacrosse games should count against him. I think he should have been able to take a red shirt that year. That's not what the rules say. I'm totally I get that. I think we should follow the rules. They're written on paper. They're easy to understand. But there is a little something there where it's like, yeah, well, you have these things for football and wrestling, but you don't have it for lacrosse, a sport that plays more games than all of those things. That doesn't make any sense.
No, I understand that. I agree. I think it is reasonable. I think he should get a red shirt for those lacrosse games. It's just not within the rule, and it sucks. That's
In the
sometimes you just
world of
gotta
like
go by the rule.
cosmic justice, that I
Yeah.
think it's more, I think it's more just for him to get an extra year. But
So yeah, I
it is
think
what it is.
I do lean towards I think he's going to get it. I don't think he should. I'm sorry. Not to be the harsh guy, but I do think rules and law matters. I think it does. Sorry, it just does. It sucks, but it does. And main thing is I'm still so frustrated that so many people don't quite understand this case and for whatever reason think that this was an obvious slam dunk. Owen Heinecke obviously deserves it. Like it wouldn't have gotten this far if it was an easy situation. There's a reason why. And it took until the very end, apparently, for maybe some people to finally realize, oh, actually, this is Heineke's argument here is not very good. So that's kind of where I want to finally. We'll see if I can do a final football. If he doesn't get it, sorry, I will football spike the heck out of everything the next show we do. I mean, not it sucks that he's not going to be on the team anymore, but just for the legal and just how understanding how things work. But again, I lean towards, I tend to agree with you. I think they wouldn't have done it probably if they didn't feel very, very confident that they'd find a judge that would help them out here. And so I do think that's going to be the case. But
And it could be.
I would love to be able, one last thing, I would love to be able to take work off on Thursday and go and sit in the courtroom and hear the entire thing. Fortunately, I can't do that. I can't take off from work, but.
And it may not be a totally like Thad Balkman may genuinely believe that their case is good. Like their lawyers have different interpretations of the law across the spectrum.
Heinecke or the
Heineke's
NCAA.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
He might think it's legit. He might.
Yeah.
So like, but the cynical side of my brain thinks that this was floated. Heineke's legal team knows that Balkman is sympathetic to this line of thinking, and there's like that's up and down our legal system. People trying to get the right judges who because judges are human beings too, and there's not
After
like
the
there wouldn't
Chambliss-
be if the law was if everybody believes the law was as simple as just reading what was on the paper, we wouldn't have any legal issues in this country. Nobody would ever think about it like in those regards, and everybody knows that is certainly not the case. So
well, that's how it is in other countries and other places that don't have the same legal standards that we do. I mean, the laws are the laws, and there's like anyways. Was like I said, go back to after the Chambliss thing came down. We had an episode. I said, hey, maybe Heinecke could just find a Cleveland County judge that's sympathetic to his argument, and here we are. We're literally there, and we'll see if that judge is sympathetic to the argument. In case he wanted to go ahead and sue, which he did.
But it's like it does hit at just like one of my annoyances with just like kind of the legal system in general is that I don't know, you're rewarded for thinking outside of the box and doing interesting things, and that's just to me is just I don't know, that's just like woo, it's a free for all. Hooray. We can start from what we want it, and we can like smart people can argue really stupid things very eloquently. And that is like I think the legal system rewards thinking like that.
All right. Well, that'll do it. Of course, we probably made a record in length of show after we wanted to go shorter. So
we didn't make a
welcome back,
record,
everybody.
but yeah, of course, it's a 2 hours. I mean, meat and potatoes, not really. A lot of two non-lawyers talking about law stuff.
Well, yeah, we need to be on
Which I
record.
know-
We got to be on record
I mean-
our thoughts.
Yeah, lawyers listening to this are probably going to are probably going to rip their ears off and are going to.
Not necessarily. I mean, because there are lawyers that understand the argument of the NCAA. There's NCAA lawyers that are making that argument. So it just depends on where you are as a lawyer. And
I'm just saying,
again,
lawyers always scoff at non-lawyers trying to talk about the law.
I see.
That's just kind of
gotcha.
what I'm where because they're trained in BS, so they prefer to like
That's
to
fair.
talk. they talk their own language.
That's fair. Yeah.
I think
Well,
lawyers are.
those
I don't
lawyers
think
also
lawyers are evil. This is not my position. I'm not a huge fan of the unique creative interpretations of the law. It's just way too cute and gets us into much more trouble than would be if we just followed what was written down.
All right. A good note to go out on. So until next time, after the spring game, at some point, we'll be back to talk whatever the heck happens in the spring game and the results of the Heinecke situation. So we'll finally get some sort of clarity on that. So until next time, for Grant, I'm Lee. This is West of Everest. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to the show. And if you want to help us spread the word, please leave us a 5-star review. And also, tell all of your friends who are OU fans about West of Everest. You can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and SoundCloud.